I stood at the back of that auditorium, my hands trembling so hard I could barely hold the cheap smartphone I'd bought at a pawnshop 3 years ago. The one I used to film every single moment of my son's life that mattered. The screen was cracked, but the camera still worked. Just like me. Broken but functioning. That's when I saw him, Marcus, walking through those double doors like he owned the place. Like he hadn't disappeared for 18 years. Like he had any right to be there. My breath caught in my throat. Not from joy. Not from relief. From rage so pure it felt like swallowing glass. He was wearing a suit. Nice one. The kind that costs more than 3 months of my rent. His hair was perfectly styled. His shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked successful. He looked happy. He looked like a man who had spent the last 18 years building a life, while I had spent them surviving. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to him and claw that smug expression off his face. But I didn't move. Because 2 rows ahead of me my son, our son, was adjusting his graduation cap, completely unaware that the man who abandoned us was standing less than 50 feet away. Let me take you back. Not to the beginning, because the beginning was beautiful, and I don't want to taint those memories with what came after. Let me take you to the moment everything shattered. The moment I learned what it truly meant to be alone. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were always our day. Marcus would come home early from his job at the construction company, and we'd have dinner together as a family. Real dinner. Not microwaved leftovers or cereal for the 3rd night in a row. Real food that I'd spend hours preparing because I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted us to be the family I dreamed of when I was a little girl, watching my own parents tear each other apart. That Tuesday I made lasagna, his favorite. I'd saved money for weeks to buy the ingredients, cutting corners everywhere else. I wore the blue dress he liked. I even put on makeup, though I was so tired from working double shifts at the diner that I could barely keep my eyes open. But I did it. 'Cause I loved him. 'Cause I believed in us. He came home at 7:30. Late. But he came. He walked through the door and I smiled, ready to show him the table I'd set, the food I'd made, the life I was trying to build for us. But he didn't smile back. He didn't even look at me. He walked straight past me into our bedroom and started packing a bag. I followed him, my heart already crumbling because some part of me knew. Some part of me had always known. Marcus. My voice was small. Smaller than I'd ever heard it. What are you doing? He didn't answer. He just kept packing. Shirts, pants, his good watch. The one I'd bought him for his birthday with money I'd borrowed from my sister. Marcus, please. Talk to me. He finally looked at me then. And the expression on his face. I'll never forget it. It wasn't anger. It wasn't guilt. It was nothing. Complete and utter indifference. Like I was a stranger. Like the 4 years we'd spent together meant absolutely nothing. I can't do this anymore, he said. His voice was flat. Emotionless. I can't be this person. I can't be stuck here working some dead-end job, living paycheck to paycheck. This isn't the life I wanted. But what about us? I was crying now, tears streaming down my face, my voice breaking with every word. What about our son? He's only 2 months old, Marcus. He needs his father. He zipped up the bag. That sound, that metallic zipping sound, it echoed in my head for years afterward. It was the sound of my life falling apart. I never wanted to be a father, he said. And then he walked out. Just like that. No explanation. No apology. No looking back. I stood in that bedroom, my legs giving out beneath me, collapsing onto the floor in a heap of blue fabric and broken dreams. The lasagna burned in the oven. I could smell it. That acrid scent of something good turning to ash. Felt appropriate. I didn't move for hours. I just sat there, staring at the empty closet, at the space where his clothes had been, trying to understand how someone could just leave. How someone could look at a 2-month-old baby, their own flesh and blood, and decide that it wasn't worth staying for. When I finally pulled myself together, when I finally forced my body to stand up and walk to the nursery, I found my son sleeping peacefully in his crib. His tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. His little fists curled up next to his face. He was beautiful, perfect, and he had no idea that his father had just walked out of his life forever. I made a promise that night. Standing over that crib, my face swollen from crying, my hands still shaking, I made a promise. I promised myself that I would be enough for him, that I would work harder than anyone had ever worked, that I would sacrifice everything to give him the life he deserved, that he would never ever know what it felt like to be abandoned. And I kept that promise. For 18 years I kept that promise. But now, standing in this auditorium, watching Marcus walk toward the front row like he had every right to be here, like he had earned the privilege of watching our son graduate, I felt that promise twist into something darker. Something that tasted like vindication and fury and a desperate, clawing need for him to know what he'd missed, what he'd thrown away. He hadn't seen me yet. He was too busy looking for a seat, too busy pretending he belonged here. And for a moment, just a moment, I considered leaving, slipping out the back door before he noticed me, before this moment became real. But I didn't, because this wasn't about him. It had never been about him. This was about my son, the boy I raised alone, the boy who I watched take his first steps while working a night shift at the factory, the boy whose parent-teacher conferences I attended with grease still under my fingernails from my afternoon job at the auto shop. The boy who learned to read because I spent every spare moment teaching him, even when I was so exhausted I could barely focus on the words. Marcus found a seat. Front row. Right in the center. Of course he did. And then the ceremony began. The principal's voice faded into white noise as I stood there, my mind pulling me back against my will. Back to a time when I still believed in fairy tales. When I thought love was enough to hold two people together. I was 21 when I met Marcus. 21 and working as a waitress at Romano's, a family-owned Italian restaurant on the corner of 5th and Madison. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and the tips were decent enough to pay for the tiny studio apartment I shared with my best friend, Claire. Had dreams back then. Small dreams maybe, but they were mine. I wanted to save enough money to go to community college, study nursing, help people, make something of myself. Marcus came in on a Friday night in October. I remember because the restaurant was decorated with fake autumn leaves and plastic pumpkins, and he made a joke about how the pumpkin on his table looked like it was judging him. Made me laugh. Real laugh. The kind that comes from your belly and makes your whole body feel lighter. He was handsome in an effortless way. Dark eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Strong hands that looked like they knew how to build things. A confidence that didn't feel arrogant, just sure. Like he knew exactly who he was and where he was going. He asked for my number before he paid the check. I gave it to him. And 3 days later we went on our first date. God, I was so young. So stupidly, hopelessly young. He took me to the pier. We ate hot dogs from a cart and watched the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. He told me about his dreams of starting his own construction company. About the house he wanted to build one day. Something with a big backyard and a porch where he could sit and watch his kids play. You want kids? I asked him, surprised. Most guys his age ran from that conversation like it was a plague. Of course, he said, looking at me like I'd asked the most obvious question in the world. Don't you? I did. I'd always wanted children. Wanted to be the kind of mother I never had. Patient. Present. Someone who actually showed up. Yeah, I told him. Someday. He smiled and took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. Someday, he repeated. That was the moment I fell in love with him. Right there on that pier, with grease from the hot dogs still on my fingers and the sound of seagulls crying overhead. I fell completely, recklessly, irrevocably in love. We moved fast after that. Too fast, probably. But when you're young and in love and convinced you've found the person you're meant to spend forever with, you don't think about consequences. You don't think about what happens when the fairy tale ends. 6 months later, I moved into his apartment. A one-bedroom place in a neighborhood that wasn't great but wasn't terrible either. It had a leaky faucet in the bathroom and a radiator that clanked all night during winter. But it was ours. We painted the bedroom walls blue together. His favorite color. We'd get paint in each other's hair and laugh until our stomachs hurt. I gave up my dream of nursing school. Not because he asked me to, but because money was tight, and it made more sense for me to work full-time while he built his career. He was the one with the real potential, I told myself. He was the one who could make something of us. Could wait. My dreams could wait. A year into our relationship, I got pregnant. It wasn't planned. We were careful, or we thought we were. But life has a way of happening whether you're ready or not. When I saw those 2 pink lines on the test, my hand started shaking so badly I had to sit down on the bathroom floor just to catch my breath. I was terrified. Terrified of telling him. Terrified of what it would mean for us. For our future. We weren't married. We were barely scraping by as it was. How could we possibly afford a baby? But when I finally worked up the courage to show him the test, sitting on our lumpy couch with tears streaming down my face, he surprised me. He pulled me into his arms and held me so tight I could barely breathe. "Hey!" he whispered into my hair. "Hey, it's okay. We're going to be okay. We're going to figure this out together." And I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. He proposed 2 weeks later. No ring. No fancy dinner. Just the 2 of us in our cramped apartment, eating Chinese takeout straight from the containers because we were too lazy to do dishes. He looked at me across the coffee table and said, "Marry me." Just like that. Simple. Direct. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Are you serious?" I asked, laughing because I thought he was joking. But he wasn't smiling. "I'm serious," he said. "I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to be the kind of father my dad never was. So marry me." Said yes. Course I said yes. How could I not? He was offering me everything I'd ever wanted. Family. Partner. Someone who would stay. We got married at City Hall 3 weeks later. No fancy ceremony. No white dress or flowers or cake. Just us, a judge, and Claire as our witness. Marcus wore the same button-down shirt he'd worn on our first date. I wore a yellow sundress I'd bought at a thrift store for $8. We exchanged vows that lasted less than 5 minutes, signed our names on a piece of paper, and walked out into the bright afternoon sun as husband and wife. It was perfect. In its own small, imperfect way, it was absolutely perfect. For a while everything was good. Marcus picked up more hours at work. I kept waitressing until my belly got too big to squeeze between the tables. We started buying baby things. A crib from a garage sale, tiny clothes from the clearance rack at Target, a stroller someone was giving away for free on Craigslist. We didn't have much, but we had enough. And we had each other. But then our son was born and something shifted. Something I didn't see coming. Something I didn't know how to fix. The labor was 36 hours. 36 hours of pain so intense I thought I might die. When they finally placed my son in my arms, this tiny, screaming, perfect creature, I felt a love so overwhelming it physically hurt. Like my chest was cracking open to make room for it. I looked at Marcus, expecting to see that same awe reflected in his eyes. Expecting him to fall in love the way I had. But he just stood there, pale and exhausted, staring at our son like he was a stranger. Like he couldn't quite believe this was real. "Do you want to hold him?" I asked. He hesitated. Actually hesitated. Then he took our son from my arms, held him for maybe 30 seconds and handed him back. "I need some air," he said, and walked out of the room. That should have been my first warning. But I was so high on hormones and exhaustion and the overwhelming rush of new motherhood that I convinced myself it was normal. That he was just overwhelmed. That he needed time to adjust. He never did. In the weeks that followed, Marcus became a ghost in our own home. He'd leave for work before the sun came up and wouldn't come back until after midnight. On his days off he'd disappear for hours. Running errands, he'd say, though he never came back with anything. He stopped touching me. Stopped talking to me. Stopped looking at our son. I tried everything. I tried giving him space. I tried forcing conversations. I tried dressing up, cooking his favorite meals, pretending everything was fine even when it clearly wasn't. Nothing worked. He was slipping away, and I couldn't hold on tight enough to stop it. 2 months after our son was born, he left. Just packed a bag and walked out on a Tuesday evening, leaving me with a baby, a pile of bills, and a heart so shattered I didn't think it would ever heal. The sound of applause jerked me back to the present. Back to the auditorium. Back to the graduation ceremony where my 18-year-old son was about to walk across that stage. Names were being called. Students were receiving their diplomas. And Marcus was still sitting in the front row, smiling like a proud father. My hands clenched into fists. The morning after Marcus left, I woke up to the sound of my son crying. For a split second, just one beautiful, cruel second, I forgot. I thought Marcus was still there. That he'd get up and check on the baby while I grabbed a few more minutes of sleep. That everything was normal. Then reality crashed over me like a wave of ice water. I dragged myself out of bed, my body aching from crying myself to sleep on the living room floor. The bedroom felt too empty, too full of ghosts. I couldn't bring myself to lie in that bed alone. Not yet. My son was screaming in his crib, his face red and scrunched up, his tiny fists flailing in the air. He was hungry. Of course he was hungry. Babies don't care that your husband just abandoned you. They don't care that your world is ending. They just need to be fed. I picked him up, feeling the weight of him in my arms, and something inside me cracked even wider. This was it. This was my life now. Just me and this helpless, beautiful creature who depended on me for everything. No partner. No backup. No one to share the burden with. I sat down in the worn rocking chair Marcus's mother had given us, one of the few gifts we'd received, and started nursing. My son latched on immediately. His cries quieting to soft whimpers and then silence. Just the sound of him eating and the creak of the chair as I rocked back and forth. That's when the fear really hit me. How was I going to do this? How was I going to raise a child alone? I had maybe $300 in our bank account. The rent was due in 2 weeks. I had a baby who needed diapers, formula for when my milk wasn't enough, clothes, medicine. I had a body that was still recovering from childbirth, still bleeding, still hurting. I couldn't go back to work yet. The doctor had said I needed at least 6 weeks to heal. 6 weeks. I didn't have 6 weeks. I didn't have 6 days. I looked down at my son, at his perfect little face. His eyes closed in contentment as he nursed, completely unaware of the panic clawing at my chest. He looked like Marcus. Same dark eyes. Same shape to his nose. It hurt to look at him sometimes. But it also filled me with a fierce, protective love that was stronger than anything I'd ever felt. I won't let you down, I whispered to him. I promise. I don't know how, but I'll figure it out. You're going to be okay. I spent that first week in a fog, feeding the baby, changing diapers, trying to sleep in stolen moments when he slept. The apartment felt different without Marcus. Bigger somehow. Emptier. Every corner reminded me of him. The coffee mug he'd left on the counter. The jacket hanging by the door that still smelled like him. The empty space in the closet where his clothes had been. Claire came over every day. She'd bring groceries, sit with me while I cried, hold the baby so I could take a shower. She was a lifeline. But even she couldn't stay forever. She had her own job, her own life. And I couldn't ask her to put everything on hold for me. On day 8 I called Marcus. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe that he'd changed his mind. That he'd realized what he'd done and wanted to come home. That this was all just a horrible mistake. He answered on the 3rd ring. What do you want? His voice was cold, annoyed. Marcus, please, I said, hating how desperate I sounded. Please come home. We need you. Your son needs you. Silence. Long enough that I thought he'd hung up. I told you, he finally said. I can't do this. Stop calling me. But what about money? How am I supposed to pay rent? How am I supposed to feed our child? That's not my problem anymore. The line went dead. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand, feeling something inside me harden, turn to stone. He wasn't coming back. He didn't care. He'd made his choice, and that choice was to walk away from his responsibilities, from his family, from us. Fine. If he wasn't going to help, I'd do it myself. I called my boss at Romano's the next day, begged her to let me come back early, explained my situation. She was sympathetic but firm. They'd already hired someone to replace me. Business was business. But she said she'd keep her ear to the ground, let me know if she heard of any openings elsewhere. I spent the next 3 days calling every restaurant, every store, every business within a 10-mile radius. Most places hung up as soon as I mentioned I had an infant. The ones that didn't told me they weren't hiring, or that they needed someone who could work nights, or weekends, or holidays, someone without complications. I was running out of options. And money. I'd paid the rent, but that left me with $73. $73 to last until I found a job, until I could figure out childcare, until I could somehow make this impossible situation work. That's when I saw the ad, taped to the window of a convenience store on my way back from another failed job interview. Night shift janitor wanted. No experience necessary. Inquire within. Night shift, which meant I could work while the baby slept. Claire had already offered to stay over when needed. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. It was a start. I went in immediately. Talked to the manager, a tired-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes. Told him I needed the job. That I'd work harder than anyone he'd ever hired. That I wouldn't let him down. He looked at me for a long moment, taking in my desperation, my exhaustion, the stain on my shirt from where my son had spit up earlier. When can you start? He asked. Tonight. He nodded. Okay. Tonight. I wanted to cry from relief. But I didn't. I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not anymore. So I thanked him, shook his hand, and walked out of that store with my first job as a single mother. The work was exactly what you'd expect. Mopping floors, cleaning toilets, taking out trash, stocking shelves. It was hard and physical and mind-numbing. But it was money. $12 an hour, 6 nights a week. It wasn't enough to live on, not really. But it was something. Claire would come over at 10 p.m., after she got off her own shift at the hospital where she worked as a receptionist. She'd sleep on my couch, listen for the baby, call me if there was an emergency. I'd work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., then come home and take over so she could get to her own job. For a few weeks it worked. I was exhausted. More exhausted than I'd ever been in my life. But I was surviving. We were surviving. Then Claire got a promotion. A better position at a hospital 40 minutes away, with hours that started at 6 a.m. She wouldn't be able to watch the baby anymore. She cried when she told me, apologizing over and over, but I wouldn't let her feel guilty. This was good for her. She deserved good things. But it meant I needed to find another solution. I started bringing my son to work with me. I'd set up a makeshift bed in the break room, just some blankets in a laundry basket, and pray he'd sleep through my shift. Sometimes he did. Sometimes he didn't. On the nights he didn't, I'd work with him strapped to my chest in a baby carrier, bouncing and shushing him while I mopped floors. My boss never said anything. He'd just give me these looks, part pity, part respect. Like he couldn't believe what he was seeing but also couldn't bring himself to stop it. I needed another job. One job wasn't enough. So I started looking again. Found a weekend gig at a laundromat, folding clothes for $8 an hour. Then a few months later, a part-time position at an auto shop, doing basic administrative work and learning to change oil because they were short-staffed and I told them I'd learn whatever they needed me to learn. 3 jobs. I was working 3 jobs, sleeping maybe 3 hours a night, living on coffee and whatever food I could afford that didn't need cooking because I was never home long enough to use the stove. My son started crawling, then walking. I missed his first steps. I was at work and Claire, who was still trying to help when she could, saw it happen and called me, excited, not realizing that every word was a knife in my chest. I missed so much. So many firsts. So many moments I could never get back. But I kept working. Kept pushing. Because what other choice did I have? Marcus never called. never sent money, never asked how his son was doing. It was like we'd never existed. And slowly, painfully, I stopped expecting him to. The auditorium erupted in applause again, and I realized another name had been called. We were getting closer. Closer to my son's name. Closer to the moment when Marcus would see him walk across that stage and claim some piece of pride he had absolutely no right to feel. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. When my son turned 3, I thought we'd turned a corner. We'd survived the hardest years, the sleepless nights, the constant fear of eviction, the empty refrigerator. I'd worked myself to the bone, and it was paying off. Barely, but enough. Then I got evicted anyway. The landlord had sold the building. New owners wanted to renovate, turn our rundown apartments into luxury condos for people who didn't have to choose between electricity and food. We had 30 days to get out. 30 days to find a new place in a city where rent kept climbing and no one wanted to rent to a single mother with bad credit and no references because I'd been living in the same place for 3 years. I spent every spare moment looking, called every number, filled out every application, and got rejected every single time. Sorry, we need first month, last month, and security deposit. Sorry, your income doesn't meet our requirements. Sorry, we don't allow children. Hurry. Like that word could fix anything. On day 28, I still hadn't found a place. I was standing in the middle of our apartment, surrounded by boxes I'd packed with shaking hands, trying not to cry in front of my son. He was playing with his toy trucks, making engine noises, completely oblivious to the fact that in 2 days we'd be homeless. Called my mother, the woman who'd told me I was making a mistake when I married Marcus, who'd said I was throwing my life away, who hadn't spoken to me in almost 4 years. Mom! My voice cracked. I need help. Silence. Mom, please. I'm about to be evicted. I have nowhere to go. It's just for a few weeks until I can find something else. Please. You made your choices, she said. Her voice was ice. You chose that man over your family. You chose to have a baby you couldn't afford. Now you want me to clean up your mess. Mom, I'm begging you. It's not for me. It's for your grandson. He's 3 years old. He didn't do anything wrong. That child is not my problem. And neither are you. Don't call this number again. She hung up. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone, feeling something inside me die. My own mother. My own blood. She'd rather see her grandson on the street than swallow her pride and help us. Fine. I didn't need her. I didn't need anyone. Claire offered us her couch, but her apartment was barely big enough for one person, and she was struggling herself. I couldn't put that burden on her. Not again. I ended up at a shelter. A women's shelter on the east side of town that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. They gave us a bed in a room with 5 other families. Thin walls, crying babies, arguments that turned into screaming matches at 2 in the morning. But it was a roof. It was something. My son hated it. He'd wake up crying, asking when we could go home, asking why we had to sleep in a room with strangers. And I'd hold him and lie, tell him it was an adventure, tell him we'd have our own place soon, tell him everything was going to be okay. But I was drowning, absolutely drowning. The shelter had rules, strict rules. Everyone had to be out by 7 a.m., couldn't come back until 5 p.m., which meant I had to drag my 3-year-old son around with me all day while I worked, while I searched for apartments, while I tried to hold my life together with both hands. I lost one of my jobs, the laundromat. My boss said I was late too many times, that I looked unfocused. How was I supposed to explain that I was living in a shelter? That I was trying to keep my son entertained in parks and libraries for 10 hours a day while managing 2 other jobs and apartment hunting. The money got tighter. I started skipping meals so my son could eat. Started walking instead of taking the bus to save $2. Started shopping at food banks, standing in line with other desperate people, taking handouts because I had no other choice. The worst part wasn't the hunger. It wasn't the exhaustion. It was the looks, pity, the judgment, the way people would stare at me, At my too thin body, my worn-out clothes, my son with his hand-me-down shoes that were too small but still had to work because I couldn't afford new ones. I went to a job interview once, for a receptionist position that paid $15 an hour. I'd borrowed a blazer from Claire, done my hair as best I could with the products in the shelter bathroom. I thought I looked presentable, professional. The woman interviewing me looked me up and down and asked, "Where are you currently living?" I should have lied, but I was so tired of lying. "I'm staying at a transitional housing facility," I said. The technical term for shelter. Her expression changed. Closed off. "I see. Well, we need someone stable. Someone reliable. I'm sure you understand." I understood perfectly. I wasn't a person to her. I was a liability. I didn't get the job. 3 weeks into living at the shelter, I hit my lowest point. I was working the night shift at the convenience store, my son asleep in the break room like always when a customer came in. Drunk. Aggressive. Started demanding cigarettes. I couldn't sell him without ID. He got angry. Started yelling, calling me names I won't repeat. And when I asked him to leave, he grabbed my wrist. Hard enough to bruise. "You think you're better than me," he spat, his breath reeking of alcohol. "You're nobody. Just some pathetic girl working a minimum wage job in the middle of the night. You're nothing." My boss came out and kicked him out, but the damage was done. I stood there behind the counter, shaking, my wrist throbbing, and thought, he's right. This is what I am. This is what I've become. I went into the bathroom and cried. Silent, heaving sobs that made my whole body shake. And then I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked. At the dark circles under my eyes. The hollow cheeks. The defeat in my expression. This wasn't who I was supposed to be. This wasn't the life I was supposed to have. I splashed water on my face, took a deep breath, and made a decision. I was going to get out of that shelter. I was going to find an apartment, even if it was a dump. I was going to keep working, keep fighting, keep surviving. Not because I wanted to, but because my son deserved better than this. He deserved a mother who didn't give up. Took another month, but I found a place. A tiny studio in a neighborhood where you could hear gunshots at night. The walls were stained, the carpet was moldy, the water pressure was non-existent. But it was ours. I paid the deposit with money I'd borrowed from a payday loan place at an interest rate that should have been illegal. I didn't care. We had a home again. My son ran around that disgusting little studio like it was a palace. He jumped on the mattress I'd bought secondhand, laughing, shouting, "We have our own house, Mama. We have our own house." And I smiled. Actually smiled. For the first time in months. We were going to be okay. We had to be. But in the back of my mind I kept thinking about Marcus. About how he was somewhere out there, living his life, free from all of this. Free from the responsibility. From the struggle. From the pain. He'd never know what it felt like to stand in line at a food bank. To sleep in a shelter. To be grabbed by a drunk stranger and told you're nothing. He'd never know because he'd chosen not to. And that knowledge burned in my chest like acid. The principal called another name. 3 more students before my son. Marcus leaned forward in his seat, his phone out, ready to record the moment. The moment he had no right to witness. The years blurred together after that. Not because they were easy, but because survival has a way of making time collapse. You stop measuring life in months or years. You measure it in shifts worked, bills paid, meals scraped together. Moments you manage to stay awake long enough to tuck your child into bed. My son started kindergarten. I'll never forget that first day. I'd saved for weeks to buy him new clothes, a polo shirt and khaki pants from the clearance rack at Walmart. I combed his hair until it shone. Packed him a lunch in a paper bag because I couldn't afford a lunchbox. Walked him to the bus stop with tears burning behind my eyes because he looked so small, so vulnerable, so excited. "Will you be here when I get back?" he asked me, his little hand gripping mine. "Always," I promised. "I'll always be here." 'Twas a lie. Not completely, but enough. Because by the time he got home from school, I'd be at my second job. And a neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived downstairs and took pity on us, would watch him for 3 hours until I could race home, still smelling like motor oil from the auto shop, and pretend I'd been there all along. Hated it. Hated leaving him with strangers. Hated missing the after-school moments other parents took for granted. But what choice did I have? If I didn't work, we didn't eat. It was that simple. School brought new challenges. Other children had things my son didn't. Nice backpacks, brand-name sneakers, money for field trips and book fairs and pizza parties. He never complained. Not once. But I saw the way he'd look at other kids' toys during playdates. The way he'd come home and tell me about birthday parties he wasn't invited to. "It's okay, Mama," he'd say when I apologized for not being able to afford the things other kids had. "I don't need that stuff." But he did. He needed to be a normal kid. To have friends and experiences and things that made him feel like he belonged. And I couldn't give him that. Tried. God, I tried. When he was 6, he came home from school talking about how everyone in his class was signing up for soccer. How much he wanted to play. How all his friends were doing it. I looked up the cost. $75 for registration. Another $60 for cleats and shin guards. Plus the uniform. Plus the costs of getting him to and from practice 3 times a week when I was already juggling 3 jobs. It was impossible. Completely impossible. But I couldn't tell him no. I couldn't watch his face fall. Couldn't add another disappointment to the pile of disappointments that was his childhood. So I picked up extra shifts. Worked doubles whenever I could. Slept 4 hours a night instead of 5. And somehow I scraped together the money. The look on his face when I told him he could play. That was worth every sleepless night. Every aching muscle. Every moment of exhaustion so profound I thought I might collapse. He was terrible at soccer. Absolutely terrible. Ran the wrong direction half the time. Spent more time watching butterflies than paying attention to the ball. But he loved it. And watching him run around that field laughing being a kid, it felt like a victory. Until the other parents started talking to me. They were nice enough at first. Asked the usual questions. Where did I work? Was I married? What did my husband do? Kept my answers vague. But eventually someone figured it out. Single mother. Multiple jobs. Living in the bad part of town. The invitations stopped. Playdates dried up. Parents would smile politely but never quite meet my eyes. Their children stopped sitting with my son at lunch. I watched it happen and felt powerless to stop it. Because what could I do? I couldn't change who I was. Couldn't change the fact that I was poor and struggling and not part of their world. My son came home crying one day. 2nd grade. Some kid had called him poor boy in front of the whole class. Said his clothes were ugly. Said his mom was a loser. I held him while he sobbed into my shoulder. And I wanted to burn the world down. Wanted to march into that school and find that kid and make him understand what his words had done. But I didn't. Couldn't. Because making a scene would only make things worse for my son. Instead, I dried his tears and told him those words didn't matter. That being poor didn't make us less than anyone. That working hard was something to be proud of, not ashamed of. But why do we have to be poor, Mama? He asked. His voice so small it broke my heart. Why can't we be like everyone else? I didn't have an answer. Not one that would make sense to a 7-year-old. So I just held him tighter and promised him it wouldn't always be this way. That things would get better. Another lie. But a necessary one. The failures kept piling up. Small ones. Constant ones. I forgot picture day at school. My son was the only kid in his class without a photo in the yearbook. I missed his school play because I had to work a double shift and couldn't find anyone to cover for me. He played a tree. Didn't have any lines. But it mattered to him, and I wasn't there. I forgot his birthday one year. Not completely. I remembered the day of, rushed to buy a cake from the grocery store on my break. But I'd been so consumed with work and bills and exhaustion that I hadn't planned anything. No party. No presents. Just a lopsided cake and a mumbled apology. He smiled and told me it was okay. That he understood. But I saw the hurt in his eyes. Each failure carved out a little more of my soul, made me hate myself a little more, made me resent Marcus a little more. Where was he during all of this? Where was he when our son was being bullied? When he needed a father to teach him how to throw a ball, how to stand up for himself, how to be a man? Where was he when I was drowning, working myself into an early grave just to keep us afloat? I didn't know. I'd stopped looking for him years ago. Stopped hoping he'd change his mind and come back. He was a ghost. Bad memory. A mistake I'd made when I was too young and too stupid to know better. But my son asked about him sometimes. Not often, but enough. Mama, why don't I have a dad? Do I look like him? Does he know about me? Each question was a knife. How do you explain to a child that his father chose not to be in his life? That he looked at him as a baby and decided he wasn't worth staying for? Can't. So you deflect. You lie. You tell sanitized versions of the truth that don't include words like abandonment and rejection. Your dad had to go away, I'd say. But he loves you. I'm sure he loves you. More lies. But what else could I do? When my son was 8, I got into a car accident. Nothing major, someone rear-ended me at a stoplight. But my car, a 15-year-old sedan that barely ran on its best day, was totaled. And I didn't have insurance. Couldn't afford it. Losing that car was catastrophic. I needed it to get to work, to take my son to school, to do everything. Public transportation in our city was a joke. Unreliable, slow, didn't run late enough for my night shifts. I tried to make it work anyway. Took the bus. Left earlier, got home later. Spent 3 hours a day in transit instead of 1. My already non-existent free time vanished completely. I lasted 2 months before I broke down. Literally broke down. Stood at a bus stop in the pouring rain at 11 p.m. after a 10-hour shift, waiting for a bus that was 40 minutes late, and just started sobbing. Great, heaving sobs that made people stare and move away from me like misery might be contagious. A woman stopped. Middle-aged, kind eyes, decent car. Honey, are you okay? I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. Do you need a ride? I should have said no. Shouldn't have gotten into a stranger's car. But I was so tired. So broken. So utterly defeated. She drove me home. Didn't ask questions. Just drove. When we pulled up to my building, she turned to me and said, "Whatever you're going through, don't give up. I don't know you, but I can see you're fighting. Keep fighting." Then she drove away, and I never saw her again. That moment stayed with me. Became a tiny spark in the darkness. 'Cause she was right. I was fighting. Every single day I was fighting. And maybe I was losing more battles than I was winning. Maybe I was barely surviving. But I was still here. Still standing. That had to count for something. I borrowed money from Claire, again, and bought another used car. This one was even worse than the last, but it ran. Mostly. Life continued. The same endless cycle. Work, bills, exhaustion. Small joys stolen in the spaces between survival. My son's 9th birthday. 10th. 11th. Each year I tried to do better. Give him more. Be more present. But there were only so many hours in a day. And most of them belonged to jobs that paid just enough to keep us one step ahead of disaster. Still no word from Marcus. Not a card. Not a phone call. Not a penny of child support. I could have taken him to court, tried to force him to pay. But I'd heard horror stories. Months of legal battles. Lawyers I couldn't afford. And even if I won, you can't squeeze blood from a stone. If he didn't want to pay, he'd find ways not to. So I stopped thinking about him. Or tried to. He became this abstract thing. The father who wasn't there. Cautionary tale. A reason for my son to grow up better, kinder, more responsible. But the anger never really went away. It lived in my chest like a coal, always burning, always hot, ready to flare up at the smallest reminder. Another name was called. 2 more until my son. Marcus was recording on his phone now, a smile on his face. Proud. Excited. Like he'd been there for every moment of the last 18 years. Like he'd earned this. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together to stop it. When my son turned 13, I got sick. Really sick. Not the kind of sick you can push through with coffee and willpower. The kind that puts you flat on your back, shaking with fever, barely able to lift your head. Pneumonia. The doctor at the urgent care clinic, the one I'd finally dragged myself to after a week of thinking it was just a cold, told me I needed to be hospitalized, that my lungs were in bad shape, that I needed rest and 4 antibiotics and monitoring. I can't, I told her, my voice barely a whisper. I have to work. I have a son. She looked at me like I was insane. Maybe I was. If you don't take care of this now, you could die, she said flatly. Is that what you want? To leave your son without a mother? The words hit me like a punch. But even then, even facing my own mortality, all I could think about was money. If I went to the hospital, I'd miss work. If I missed work, I wouldn't get paid. If I didn't get paid, we wouldn't make rent. And if we didn't make rent, we'd be back on the streets. I took the prescription she gave me and left. Promised I'd rest. Another lie. I made it through 2 more shifts before my body gave out completely. I collapsed at the auto shop, right there on the concrete floor, my vision going black, my lungs screaming for air that wouldn't come. I woke up in the hospital. Claire was there, her face pale and frightened. She'd been listed as my emergency contact for years, the only person I had. You could have died, she said, her voice shaking. The doctors said if I hadn't found you when I did, you could have died. My son, I croaked. Where's? He's fine. He's with Mrs. Chen. But you need to stop this. You can't keep destroying yourself like this. But I could. I had. For 13 years, I'd been destroying myself piece by piece, burning through my health and sanity and any chance at a normal life. Because what other choice did I have? They kept me in the hospital for 4 days. 4 days of 4 antibiotics and breathing treatments and doctors telling me I needed to slow down, reduce stress, take better care of myself. 4 days of watching the bills pile up in my mind, calculating exactly how much this hospitalization was going to cost, how many months it would take to pay off, how far behind we'd fall. I was released with instructions to rest for 2 weeks. I went back to work after 3 days. My boss at the convenience store took one look at me and told me to go home. I was gray, sweating, could barely stand. But I begged him to let me stay. Told him I needed the hours. That I couldn't afford to miss any more work. He let me stay. I think he felt sorry for me. Or maybe he was just desperate for coverage. Either way, I worked that shift half dead, coughing so hard I thought I'd break a rib, and somehow made it through. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not physically. Physically, I'd been broken for years. But mentally, emotionally, the part of me that had been holding on, that had been telling myself I could do this, that everything would be okay, it shattered. I got home that night and my son was asleep. Mrs. Chen had made him dinner, helped him with his homework, put him to bed. She did it all with a kindness that made me want to weep because it was a stark reminder of everything I wasn't doing, everything I was failing at. I sat on the edge of my bed, our bed, because we still only had 1 bedroom and I'd given him the bedroom while I slept on a mattress in the living room, and I thought about giving up. Not in the dramatic way. Not pills or bridges or anything like that. But giving up in the quiet way. Calling child services. Telling them I couldn't do this anymore. That my son deserved better than a half-dead mother who couldn't give him anything he needed. That maybe he'd be better off with someone else. A real family. People who had time and money and stability. I thought about it for a long time. Sat there in the dark, my lungs aching with every breath, and seriously considered it. Then my son coughed. A small sound from his bedroom. Just clearing his throat in his sleep. But it snapped me out of my spiral. I walked to his room, pushed open the door, and looked at him. He was 13 now. Not a baby anymore. Almost as tall as me. His face had started to lose its childish roundness, showing hints of the man he'd become. He looked so much like Marcus it hurt. But he wasn't Marcus. He was better, kinder, stronger. On his nightstand was a drawing he'd made in art class. A picture of the 2 of us. Stick figures, crude but recognizable. Above us he'd written in careful letters, "My hero." I picked it up with shaking hands and read it again. My hero. Me. The woman who'd failed him in 1,000 ways. Who'd missed his school plays and forgotten his birthday and couldn't afford to give him the life he deserved. That was his hero. Something inside me that had been cold and dead sparked back to life. Just a flicker. But it was enough. I couldn't give up. Not because I was strong. Not because I was brave. But because he needed me. And despite everything, despite all my failures and shortcomings and mistakes, I was still his mother. I was still the one person who would never abandon him. Not like Marcus did. The thought of Marcus sent a fresh wave of rage through me. Where was he while I was working myself to death? While I was collapsing on concrete floors and contemplating giving away my child because I couldn't provide for him? Where was he while our son was growing up without a father, without half of what he needed, without any of the stability and love a child deserved from both parents? He was out there somewhere living his life, free, unburdened, while I drowned. The unfairness of it crashed over me like a wave. I wanted to scream, to find him and make him look at what he'd done, make him see the cost of his choice. But I couldn't, because I didn't even know where he was. He'd disappeared so completely it was like he'd never existed. I put the drawing back on my son's nightstand and walked out of his room. Made it to the bathroom before I started crying. Silent, bitter tears that tasted like exhaustion and despair. I looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. I was 39 years old but looked 50. My face was gaunt, my eyes hollow. My hair, which had once been thick and shiny, was dull and starting to go gray. My body was wrecked from years of physical labor and not enough food. I looked like exactly what I was. Someone who'd been ground down to nothing. This is what survival looks like, I thought. This is what it costs. I thought about my younger self. The girl who'd dreamed of being a nurse. Who'd believed in love and fairy tales and happy endings. Who'd thought Marcus was going to be her forever. That girl was dead. Had been dead for years. And I didn't even have the energy to mourn her. I slept on the floor that night because I was too tired to pull out my mattress. Just curled up on the threadbare carpet and closed my eyes and prayed for the strength to wake up and do it all again tomorrow. The next morning I got up, made my son breakfast, got him off to school, went to work, came home, made dinner, helped with homework, went to my second job, came home, collapsed. And the day after that I did it again, and again, and again, because that's what you do when you're a mother. When you're the only thing standing between your child and disaster, you keep going. Not because you want to, not because you can, but because you have to. But something inside me still pulsed. Some stubborn animal instinct to survive, fight, to prove that I was worth more than the hand I'd been dealt. I didn't know it then, but that moment, standing in my son's doorway, seeing that drawing, feeling that flicker reignite, that was the moment everything started to change. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly, like the first thaw after a brutal winter. One more name was called. The next one would be my son. Marcus stood up, his phone ready, that proud smile still plastered on his face. And I realized with sudden, crystal clarity that I was going to confront him. Today, after the ceremony, I was going to walk up to that man and make him see exactly what he'd missed. Exactly what his absence had cost. Not for me, but for our son. The boy who deserved to know that his father was a coward. After the pneumonia, after the collapse, after that night of staring into the abyss and choosing to keep going, something shifted. Not overnight. Not in some dramatic revelation. But slowly, like ice melting one drop at a time. I started making different choices. Small ones. Invisible ones. The kind no one notices but that change everything. The first choice was about my son's education. He was in 8th grade, getting good grades despite everything. Despite the chaos of our life. Despite having a mother who was barely present. He was smart. Really smart. His teachers told me he had potential. That he could go to college if he worked hard enough. College. The word felt like a cruel joke. How was my son supposed to go to college when I could barely afford to keep him fed? When I'd never finished my own education? when the idea of saving money for anything beyond next week's rent was a fantasy. But I couldn't let my limitations become his. I couldn't let Marcus's abandonment determine the trajectory of our son's entire life. So I went to the school counselor, a woman named Ms. Rodriguez, who looked at me with kind eyes that didn't judge when I explained our situation, who didn't make me feel ashamed of being poor and struggling and desperate. There are programs, she told me. Scholarships for kids like your son. Academic opportunities. But he needs to start preparing now. Better grades. Extracurriculars. Test prep. Extracurriculars. Things that cost money we didn't have. I can't afford, I started, but she held up her hand. There are free options. I can help you find them. But you need to commit. Both of you. This is going to take work. I'd been working my entire adult life. What was a little more? Committed. We both did. My son started staying after school for free tutoring programs. Joined clubs that didn't cost money. Debate team, science Olympiad, environmental club. I rearranged my schedule, dropped my weekend laundromat shift, and picked up more hours during the week so I could be home on Saturday mornings to help him study. It meant less money. It meant even tighter budgets, even more creative ways to stretch every dollar. But it also meant investing in his future, in the possibility that he could be more than I was, have more than I'd had. The second choice was about my health. I couldn't keep destroying my body. If I died, if I got sick again and didn't recover, my son would have nothing. No one. I'd worked so hard to keep us afloat that I'd forgotten the most basic truth. He needed me alive more than he needed the extra $50 a week from killing myself. I started sleeping more. Not a lot. I couldn't afford to quit any of my jobs. But I stopped taking every extra shift offered. Stopped saying yes to doubles unless it was absolutely necessary. Let myself rest one day a week. Actually rest. Felt wrong at first. Indulgent. Like I was being lazy or selfish. But then I noticed I wasn't getting sick as often. Wasn't collapsing from exhaustion. Could actually think clearly instead of moving through life in a fog of fatigue. The third choice was the hardest. I stopped being ashamed. For years, I'd hidden our poverty like it was a disease. Made excuses for why my son couldn't go on field trips. Avoided other parents at school events. Lied about where I worked and why I looked so tired all the time. I'd internalized the world's judgment of me. Single mother, poor, uneducated, struggling, and let it make me feel small. But I wasn't small. I was surviving. Every single day against impossible odds I was surviving. That wasn't something to be ashamed of. That was something to be proud of. So I stopped hiding. When my son's teachers asked why I couldn't volunteer for daytime events, I told them the truth. I worked 3 jobs and couldn't take time off. When other parents asked about our situation, I didn't deflect. Owned it. This was my life. Our life. And we were doing our best. The shame started to lift. Not completely. Poverty leaves scars that don't heal easily. But enough that I could hold my head up. Enough that my son saw me standing tall instead of shrinking. He noticed. Started standing taller himself. Stopped apologizing for what we didn't have. Started talking about college like it was possible instead of a pipe dream. That gave me hope. Real tangible hope. The kind I hadn't felt in years. In his sophomore year of high school, something happened that changed everything. My son came home with a letter. A thick envelope from a summer program at a local university. A STEM camp for underprivileged students. Full scholarship. Housing, meals, education, all free. They'd nominated him based on his grades and his teacher recommendations. "Can I go?" he asked me. His eyes bright with excitement but also fear. Fear that I'd say no. That we couldn't make it work. That even this free opportunity would somehow be too much. "Yes," I said immediately. "Yes, you can go." He hugged me. Actually hugged me. He was 15 and too cool for that most days. But in that moment he was a little boy again, my little boy, and he wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "Thank you, Mama." I held him and cried. Happy tears this time. Because for the first time in his life something was going right. Something good was happening that he deserved. That summer, while he was at camp, I did something I'd been too scared to do for 18 years. I looked for Marcus. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was seeing our son thriving, finally having opportunities, and wanting Marcus to know what he'd missed. Maybe it was anger that had been festering for nearly 2 decades. Maybe it was just curiosity about what kind of life he'd built while we'd been struggling. I started with social media. Created a fake account. I didn't want him to know it was me, and searched his name. Found him on the 3rd try. Marcus Rivera. Living 2 hours away in the city. Married. 2 kids. Nice house in the suburbs based on the photos. He worked in real estate now. Looked successful. Happy. Like he'd built the exact life he'd told me he wanted that night on the pier. The house with the backyard, the family, the stability. Just not with us. The photos gutted me. Him smiling with his arm around a pretty blonde woman. Him at a baseball game with a boy who looked about 8. Him pushing a little girl on a swing set. He'd become a father. Just not to our son. I stared at those photos for hours. Tried to understand how someone could walk away from one child and then have others. How he could look so happy when he'd left behind so much pain. How he could build a new family like we'd never existed. There was a photo of him at a restaurant celebrating something. The caption said, 20 years with my forever love. 20 years. He'd been with this woman for 20 years. Which meant he'd met her right around the time he left me. Maybe before. Had he been cheating? Had he left us for her? Or had he just moved on that quickly, finding someone new while I was still drowning in the wreckage he'd left behind? I never know. And maybe it didn't matter. The result was the same. He'd chosen a different life. And we were the ones who'd paid the price. Closed the laptop. Sat in the dark of our apartment. Still small, still shabby, but ours. And I made another decision. Silent one. One I didn't share with anyone. I wasn't going to tell my son. Not about finding Marcus. Not about his half-siblings or his father's new life. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because what good would it do? It would only hurt him. Make him wonder why he wasn't enough. Why Marcus's other children deserved a father but he didn't. And I couldn't do that to him. Not when he was finally starting to believe in himself. Starting to see a future that didn't involve struggle and poverty and pain. But I saved the information. Wrote down Marcus's address, his phone number, his workplace. Put it in an envelope and tucked it away in the back of my closet. Just in case. Just in case my son ever asked. Just in case he needed to know. Or just in case I ever found the courage to confront the man who destroyed me. My son came home from camp transformed. More confident. More focused. Talking about engineering and scholarships and possibilities I'd never dared to imagine. The counselors told him he had a real shot at a good college. Maybe even a full ride if he kept his grades up and aced his standardized tests. We started preparing. I bought test prep books from the thrift store. He studied every night after homework. Took practice tests until he could recite questions in his sleep. Applied for every scholarship, every grant, every program that might give him a chance. I worked. Kept working. Kept grinding. But now it felt different. Like I was working toward something instead of just surviving. Like every shift had a purpose beyond keeping us alive. For the first time in 18 years I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we were going to make it. That all the sacrifice and pain and struggle might actually lead somewhere. That our son might actually have a future. The principal's voice rang out clear and strong. David Marcus Rivera. My son's name. Our son's name. He stood up, tall and proud in his cap and gown, and started walking toward the stage. The auditorium erupted in applause. I was on my feet before I even realized I was moving, tears streaming down my face, clapping so hard my hands hurt. That was my boy, my son. The child I'd raised alone through poverty and struggle and 1,000 impossible obstacles. And Marcus was recording it. Standing there in the front row with his phone out, filming like he had any right to this moment. The rage that flooded through me was so intense I couldn't see straight. My son walked across that stage with his head held high, shook the principal's hand, received his diploma. The camera flashes went off like stars exploding. Parents cheered, students whistled, and I stood there, frozen, watching Marcus capture it all on his phone like this moment belonged to him. It didn't belong to him. Belonged to us. To every sleepless night, every missed meal, every sacrifice that had brought us to this exact moment. My son looked out into the crowd, searching. His eyes found me, not Marcus, me, in the back row where I'd been standing this whole time, and he smiled. The biggest, brightest smile I'd seen in years. Pointed at me, mouthed the words, "We did it, Mama. We did it. Not him. Not Marcus." And in that moment everything else fell away. The anger, the exhaustion, the years of pain. All that mattered was that smile, that acknowledgement, that proof that everything I'd sacrificed had been worth it. But I need to tell you how we got here. Because the journey from that summer camp to this graduation wasn't magic. It was work. Brutal, relentless, never-ending work. But it was also hope. The kind of hope that builds slowly, brick by brick, until you look up one day and realize you've constructed something real. After my son came home from that STEM camp, sophomore year became a turning point. He threw himself into school with a focus I'd never seen before. Started waking up at 5 a.m. to study before school. Stayed late for extra help. Joined more clubs, took on leadership positions. Built a resume that looked impossible for a kid from our background. And I supported him the only way I knew how, by continuing to work. But smarter now, more strategically. I'd been at the auto shop for almost 10 years by then. Started as administrative help, learned on the job, picked up skills wherever I could. My boss Joe, a gruff man in his 60s who rarely smiled but had a heart of gold, pulled me aside one day. "You're good at this," he said, gesturing to the engine I'd been working on. "Better than half the mechanics I've got. You ever think about getting certified? Becoming an actual mechanic instead of just someone who helped out. It would mean better pay. Real pay. The kind that might let me drop one of my other jobs." "I can't afford the classes," I told him. "I'll pay for them," he said. "You work it off. Deal." I almost cried right there in that garage. This man, who barely knew me, who had no obligation to me, was offering me a chance. A real chance to improve our situation. "Deal," I said. I took night classes twice a week. Learned proper technique, got my certifications, became a legitimate mechanic. Took 8 months. 8 months of even less sleep, of juggling 3 jobs plus classes, of studying vocabulary I'd never heard before and practicing skills on Joe's cars until my hands were perpetually stained with grease. But I did it. Passed every test. Got certified. And Joe raised my pay by $6 an hour. $6. Doesn't sound like much. But multiplied across 40 hours a week, it was life-changing. It meant I could finally drop the night shift at the convenience store. Could sleep more than 4 hours a night. Could actually be home in the evenings when my son was doing homework. The first night I sat at our small kitchen table and helped him with calculus problems I barely understood. He looked at me like I'd given him the world. "You're here," he said simply. "I'm here," I agreed. Those small victories started adding up. My son made honor roll. Then high honor roll. Got inducted into the National Honor Society. Started winning science competitions. His college counselor called me in for a meeting and told me he was on track for top-tier universities. That he had a real shot at the Ivy League if he kept this up. The Ivy League. My son. The same kid who'd worn 2 small shoes and eaten free lunch and lived in a shelter. That kid might go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton. Seemed impossible. But so had everything else we'd accomplished. Junior year brought new challenges. Says, college visits we couldn't afford. Application fees that added up fast. But there were programs. Always programs for kids like my son. Fee waivers. Free college tours for underprivileged students. Scholarships that covered test prep. We took advantage of every single one. I swallowed my pride, what little was left, and let my son be labeled disadvantaged and low income, and all the other terms that made my stomach turn. 'Cause those labels opened doors. Gave him opportunities that would have been locked otherwise. He visited campuses I'd only seen in movies. Big, sprawling universities with libraries the size of our entire apartment building. Dorms that looked like hotels. Resources and opportunities that seemed infinite. Can we really afford this? He asked me after touring a private university in Massachusetts. Even with scholarships. We'll figure it out, I told him. You just focus on getting in. Let me worry about the rest. Another promise I wasn't sure I could keep. But I'd kept impossible promises before. Senior year arrived faster than I expected. My son was 17, applying to colleges, writing essays about overcoming adversity that made me cry when he let me read them. He wrote about me, about watching me work 3 jobs, about learning resilience and determination from a mother who never gave up. You're my hero, he wrote in one essay. Not because she's perfect, but because she never stopped trying, never stopped fighting for us. She taught me that circumstances don't define you, choices do. And she chose me. Every single day she chose me. I had to leave the room when I read that. Had to lock myself in the bathroom and sob into a towel so he wouldn't hear. Because I'd spent 17 years thinking I was failing him. Thinking I wasn't enough. Thinking he deserved better than what I could give him. But he didn't see failure. He saw strength. He saw love. He saw a mother who'd moved mountains to give him a chance. The college acceptances started rolling in. State schools, private universities, full rides, partial scholarships, acceptance after acceptance after acceptance. Then the big one came. A thick envelope from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the best engineering schools in the world. My son opened it with shaking hands, me standing beside him in our cramped living room, both of us too scared to breathe. Dear David, he read aloud. Congratulations. He didn't get past that word before we were both screaming, jumping, hugging, crying, laughing. He'd gotten into MIT. My son. The boy I'd raised in poverty and struggle and chaos. He was going to MIT. The financial aid package came 2 weeks later. Full tuition, room and board, stipend for books and living expenses. He wouldn't have to take out a single loan. Wouldn't have to work his way through school like I'd had to work my way through life. He could just focus on learning, on becoming whoever he wanted to be. How did this happen? He asked me the night after we got the package. How did we go from living in a shelter to this? You happened, I told him. You worked harder than anyone I've ever known. You earned this. We earned this, he corrected. You and me. Together. Together. That word meant everything. The weeks leading up to graduation were a blur. Cap and gown fittings. Senior activities. Finals. My son was everywhere at once. Finishing strong, saying goodbye to friends, preparing for the next chapter of his life. I was preparing too. In secret. Saving every extra dollar. Planning a graduation gift. Nothing big. I'd never be able to give him anything big, but something meaningful. Bought him a watch. Not new. Couldn't afford new. But a nice one from a pawn shop. Had it engraved on the back. Time to build your dreams. Love, Mom. Cost me 2 weeks of groceries. But it was worth it. Because he deserved to know that I was proud. That I believed in him. That every sacrifice had led to this. And now we were here. Graduation day. The finish line of 18 years of struggle. My son left the stage, diploma in hand. That proud smile still on his face. He looked happy. Free. Like the weight he'd been carrying his whole life. The weight of our poverty, our struggles, our impossible circumstances, had finally lifted. I wanted that for him. Wanted him to be free of all of it. To go to MIT and build a life that didn't involve struggle and sacrifice and making impossible choices. But first I had to deal with Marcus. 'Cause he was moving. Walking out of his row. Heading toward the aisle where the graduates were gathering for photos. going to approach our son, going to act like he had any right to be in this moment. I started moving too, pushing through the crowd, my heart pounding, my hands clenched into fists. 18 years of anger and pain and injustice propelling me forward. This ends today, I thought. One way or another, this ends today. I caught up to Marcus just as he reached the area where the graduates were gathered. He was scanning the crowd, looking for someone. For our son. For David. The boy whose first steps he'd never seen. Whose tears he'd never dried. Whose name he probably hadn't spoken in 18 years. Marcus. My voice cut through the noise of celebration like a blade. He turned, and for a second, just one beautiful second, I saw recognition flash across his face. Then confusion. Then something that looked almost like fear. "Do I know you?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "Do I know you?" For words that felt like being slapped. "It's me," I said, my voice shaking. "It's Sarah, wife, the mother of your son. The woman you walked out on 18 years ago." His face went pale. Actually pale. Like he'd seen a ghost. Which I suppose in a way he had. I was the ghost of his past. The reminder of the life he'd abandoned. The consequence he'd been running from. "Sarah," he said, my name sounding foreign in his mouth. What are you doing here? What was I doing here? Not "how have you been" or "I'm sorry," or any of the 1,000 things he should have said. Just confusion that I had the audacity to exist in the same space as him. "I'm here for my son's graduation," I said, emphasizing the word "my." "You know, the son you abandoned when he was 2 months old. The son you've never called, never sent money to, never acknowledged. That son." People were starting to stare. Other parents. Graduates. I didn't care. Let them stare. Let them see exactly what kind of man Marcus Rivera was. "Look," he said, his voice dropping low, trying to be reasonable. "I don't think this is the time or place for this conversation. This is supposed to be a happy day." "A happy day," I repeated, my voice rising. "You think you get to have a happy day? You think you get to show up here after 18 years of nothing and celebrate? Celebrate what, Marcus? What exactly did you contribute to this moment? Sarah, please." "No." I stepped closer, close enough to see the fine lines around his eyes, the gray starting to thread through his hair. He'd aged. Of course he had. But he looked good. Healthy. Well-fed. Rested. Like a man who'd spent the last 18 years living instead of surviving. "You don't get to, Sarah, please me. You don't get to ask me to be quiet or reasonable or calm. I've been all of those things for 18 years while I raised our son alone. While I worked 3 jobs. While I lived in a shelter and went hungry so he could eat. Where were you?" He looked away, couldn't meet my eyes. "I was young. I made mistakes. I wasn't ready to be a father. None of us are ready." The words exploded out of me. "You think I was ready?" I was 21 years old, terrified, with no idea what I was doing. But I didn't run. I didn't abandon my child because it was hard. I stayed. I fought. I sacrificed everything. "I'm sorry," he said, but the words were hollow. Meaningless. "I am. But I can't change the past. I'm here now. I want to meet him. To be part of his life." I laughed. Actually laughed. A harsh, bitter sound that made him flinch. "You want to be part of his life? After he's raised. After all the hard work is done. After 18 years of birthdays and school plays and sick nights and homework and teaching him to be a man without a father. Now you want to show up." "He's my son too," Marcus said, and there was something defensive in his voice now. Like he was the victim in this scenario. "I have a right. You have no rights." I was in his face now, my voice deadly quiet. "You gave up your rights when you walked out that door. When you chose to build a new life with a new family. Yeah, I know about them. Wife. Your other kids. The ones you decided were worth staying for." His eyes widened. "How did you? It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that you got to start over. You got to have the life you wanted. The house in the suburbs. The happy family. the stability, while we struggled. While your son grew up poor and hungry and wondering why his father didn't love him enough to stay. I do love him, Marcus said, and he actually looked like he believed it. I've always loved him. I couldn't handle it then. But I'm different now. Older. More mature. I want to make things right. You can't make this right. Each word was a hammer. There is no making this right. You can't go back and hold him when he was crying. You can't go back and teach him to ride a bike. You can't go back and be there for the first day of kindergarten or the school bullies or the nights when he asked me why he wasn't good enough for his father to stay. Those moments are gone. You don't get them back. Around us, the crowd had gone quiet. People were definitely watching now. But I couldn't stop. 18 years of words I'd never been able to say were pouring out of me like blood from a wound. Do you know what it's like? Asked him. To work until your body breaks. To miss your child's milestones because you're too busy trying to keep him fed. To stand in line at a food bank and feel like you're less than human. To have your own mother tell you your child isn't her problem. Sarah, I'm not finished. My voice cracked, but I pushed through. Do you know what it's like to watch your son draw a picture of the two of you that will never exist? To hear him ask why all the other kids have dads and he doesn't. To lie to him year after year, telling him that his father loves him, that his father thinks about him, when the truth is his father chose to forget he exists. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's not fair. You don't know what I was going through. What I was dealing with. I was drowning too. Then you should have learned to swim. Shouted. You don't get to drown and take us with you. You don't get to make a child and then decide it's too hard and walk away. What do you want from me? He asked, and there was anger in his voice now. You want me to apologize? Fine. Sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough. I'm sorry I failed you. I'm sorry I failed him. But I'm here now. I'm trying. Doesn't that count for something? No, I said simply. It doesn't. Not to me. Maybe to him. Maybe our son will be a better person than I am and find it in his heart to forgive you. Maybe he'll want a relationship with you. But that's his choice to make, not yours. You don't get to force your way into his life just because you're feeling guilty or nostalgic or whatever this is. I saw his name in the paper, Marcus said quietly. Graduating with honors. I was proud. I wanted to see him. To congratulate him. Is that so wrong? Yes. The word was final. Because you weren't there for any of it. You don't get to feel proud. You don't get to take credit. That pride belongs to him. To the work he did despite you. Despite everything you took from us. Mama. The voice cut through everything. Uncertain. Devastated. I turned and there was my son. Standing 10 feet away, his cap crooked. His diploma clutched in his hand. His face a mask of confusion and hurt. Mama, what's going on? He was looking between me and Marcus, and I saw the moment he understood. The moment he recognized the resemblance. Saw his own eyes in Marcus's face. His own nose. His own jawline. David, Marcus said, and his voice broke on the name. I'm your father. My son stood frozen. Just stood there processing. And I watched his face cycle through emotions. Confusion, recognition, shock, hurt, anger. You're my father, he repeated, his voice flat. The father who's been gone my entire life. Yes, Marcus said. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I'm here now. I want to know you. I want. Get out. My son's voice was quiet but absolute. What? Marcus looked stunned. Get out, David repeated louder this time. This is my graduation. My day. My moment with my mother. The woman who actually raised me. You don't get to be here. You don't get to be part of this. David, please, if you just give me a chance. I said get out. The auditorium had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching. But David didn't care. He walked past Marcus without another glance and came straight to me. Put his arms around me. Held me while I shook. It's okay, Mama, he whispered. I've got you. You've always had me. Now I've got you. And then the phone rang. Not my phone. Marcus's phone. It rang loud and insistent in the stunned silence of the auditorium. He fumbled for it, his face still pale from David's rejection, his hands shaking as he pulled it from his pocket. "Not now," he muttered, about to decline the call. But then he saw the name on the screen and his expression changed. Panic. Real visceral panic. "I have to take this," he said, stepping away from us. But we were close enough to hear. Close enough to catch fragments of the conversation that would change everything. "What do you mean the deal fell through?" Marcus's voice was rising. No. I signed the papers. I put everything into that property. Everything. Was. His face going from pale to gray. "What do you mean fraud?" "I didn't, that wasn't." Another pause. Longer this time. "How much? How much am I liable for?" The number he said next made my eyes widen. 6 figures. He was liable for 6 figures in a real estate deal gone bad. "My house." His voice cracked. "You can't, I have a family. I have kids. You can't take my house." But apparently they could. Because Marcus's face crumbled. Absolutely crumbled. The successful businessman facade falling away to reveal something desperate and terrified underneath. He hung up. Stood there staring at his phone like it was a bomb that had just gone off in his hands. "Everything okay?" I asked, and I hated that there was a tiny part of me that felt satisfaction. That felt like maybe, just maybe, the universe was finally delivering justice. "I'm being sued," he said, his voice hollow. "A property deal. My business partner committed fraud and now I'm on the hook for it. They're going to take everything. My house. My savings. Everything." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something that shocked me. He was going to ask for help. This man who had abandoned us, who had built a life while we struggled, was about to ask me for money. "Don't," I said before he could speak. "Don't you dare." "I wasn't." "Yes, you were. You were about to ask me for help. For money. After everything." I shook my head, incredulous. "Do you have any idea how much I've scraped together over 18 years? How much I have in savings?" He said nothing. $12,000, I told him. $12,000 that I bled for. That I earned working myself half to death. Money I've been saving for David's expenses at MIT. For textbooks and emergencies and anything he might need. And you thought, for even a second, that I would give it to you. "I wasn't going to ask," he said, but we both knew he was lying. Good. Because the answer would have been no. "You made your choices, Marcus. You chose to leave. You chose to build a new life. You chose to take risks with your business. And now you get to live with the consequences. Just like I had to live with the consequences of your abandonment." "That's different," he protested weakly. "How?" I demanded. "How is it different? You made a choice that ruined your life. I was left with a choice you made that ruined mine. The only difference is I didn't get to walk away. I didn't get a do-over or a fresh start. I had to stay and face it. Every single day." David was still beside me, quiet, taking it all in. Watching his father unravel in real time. Watching karma deliver what 18 years of anger had never been able to. "I have other kids," Marcus said desperately. "A wife. They're going to lose their home because of this. What am I supposed to do?" And there it was. The parallel so perfect it almost hurt. He was about to lose everything just like I had when he left. His children were about to suffer. Just like his first child had suffered. "You're supposed to figure it out," I said. "The same way I figured it out. Get more jobs. Work harder. Sacrifice. Isn't that what you would have told me if I'd called you all those years ago? If I'd begged you for help when we were living in a shelter?" He had no answer. What answer could there be? "But here's the difference between us," I continued, my voice softening slightly. "I didn't have a choice. Those kids of yours. They have a father who'll stay. Who'll fight for them. Who'll work himself to the bone to make sure they're okay. You made sure of that when you learned from your mistakes the second time around. So they'll be fine. I have you. All of you. The irony hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "I'm sorry," Marcus said again, and this time I heard real regret in his voice. Not just for leaving, but for everything. For the life he could have had with us. For the son he'd missed knowing. For the woman he'd destroyed who had somehow built herself back up despite him. "I know you are," I said. "And maybe that matters. Maybe it would have mattered if you'd said it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But right now, today, it's too late for sorry." "Is it too late for me?" he asked, looking at David. "Is it too late for us to have anything? Even just to know each other?" David had been silent through all of this, just listening, processing. And now he looked at Marcus, really looked at him, with eyes that were so much older than 18. "I don't know," David said honestly. Maybe not. But not today. Not like this. You don't get to show up at my graduation and expect instant forgiveness. You don't get to walk back into my life because yours is falling apart. That's not why. Isn't it?" David challenged. "You've known where we were for years. Mom's not exactly hard to find. But you only showed up now. Right when your life is crumbling. That's not wanting a relationship. That's wanting an escape." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, had no defense. "If you want to know me," David continued, "if you want to try to build something, then do the work. Show up. Consistently. Not because you need something or because you're feeling guilty, but because you actually want to be part of my life. Prove it." "I will," Marcus said quickly. "I promise I will." "Don't promise me," David said. "Show me. Starting a year from now. Give me a year to process this, to figure out how I feel, to talk to a therapist because I'm definitely going to need therapy after this. And then, if you're still interested, if you've sorted out your life and you're ready to actually show up, not just once but consistently, then maybe we can talk." It was more grace than Marcus deserved. More than I would have given. But it was David's choice to make. His relationship to define or refuse. Marcus nodded slowly. "A year. Babe. I'll get my life together. Fix this mess. And I'll reach out. I promise." "We'll see," David said non-committally. Marcus looked at me one last time. "Sarah, Go," I said tiredly. "Just go. Fix your life. Take care of your family. And maybe, in a year my son will decide you're worth his time. But I'm done. We're done. We were done 18 years ago. This doesn't change that." He nodded, turned, walked away through the crowd that parted for him like he was contagious. And I watched him go, feeling nothing. No satisfaction. No anger. No vindication. Just emptiness where he used to live. David pulled me close again. "Are you okay, Mama?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Are you?" "I don't know either." He laughed shakily. "That was a lot." "Yeah. Did you mean it? That we're done with him?" "That's up to you," I said. "He's your father. If you want a relationship with him, I won't stop you. But I'm done. He doesn't get to be part of my life anymore. Not after everything." David nodded against my shoulder. "I might want to know him. Eventually. But you're my parent. You're the one who raised me. You're the one who mattered." Those words. Those perfect healing words. They filled up all the empty spaces Marcus had carved out. Made 18 years of sacrifice worth it. "I love you," I told my son. "I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud." "I love you too, Mama. And thank you. For everything. For never giving up. For fighting for me. For being enough." Being enough. After 18 years of thinking I wasn't, my son was telling me I was. We stood there in the middle of that auditorium, holding each other while the crowd slowly returned to their celebrations, and I finally let myself believe it. I was enough. We were enough. And whatever happened next, with Marcus, with MIT, with the rest of our lives, we would face it together. The way we always had. The celebration after the ceremony was bittersweet. Claire showed up with flowers. Bright yellow sunflowers that reminded me of happier times. She hugged David so tight he laughed and told her he couldn't breathe. Then she hugged me and I did cry because she'd been there for all of it. Every impossible moment, every small victory. She was the witness to our survival. "I'm so proud of both of you," she said, tears streaming down her own face. "You did it. You actually did it." We went to dinner at a modest restaurant. Nothing fancy, but nicer than anything we usually allowed ourselves. David ordered the most expensive thing on the menu without even looking at the price, and I didn't stop him. For once, just this once, we could celebrate without counting every penny. "How are you feeling?" Claire asked me quietly while David was in the bathroom. About Marcus. About everything that happened. Thought about it. Really thought about it. "I don't know," I admitted. I wanted him to hurt. For years, I fantasized about confronting him, about making him see what he'd done. And now that it happened, I just feel tired. "That's allowed," Claire said gently. "You're allowed to be tired. You've earned the right to rest." Rest. The concept felt foreign. I'd been running for so long I didn't know how to stop. David came back and we talked about MIT. About his roommate assignment. About what classes he wanted to take. About the future that was suddenly, impossibly real. And slowly, the heaviness from the confrontation started to lift. Not completely, but enough. That night, after we got home, after Claire left, after the exhaustion of the day finally caught up with us, David sat with me on our worn couch. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Always. Do you hate him?" "My father." I considered the question. The honest answer. "I did," I said slowly. "For a long time, I hated him with everything in me. Hated him for leaving. For choosing himself over us. For building a life while we struggled. But hate is exhausting. And somewhere along the way, I realized I didn't have energy left for it. No, I don't hate him anymore. I pity him. Pity him. Yeah, 'cause he missed out on you. He missed watching you grow up, hearing your laugh, seeing your first day on a test. He missed bedtime stories and scraped knees and all the tiny moments that make up a life. And he'll never get those back. No matter what happens from here, he'll never have what we have. That's his loss. Not ours." David was quiet for a long moment. "I think I might want to talk to him. Eventually. Not because I owe him anything, but because, I don't know. I'm curious. About where I come from. About that part of me." "Then you should," I said. "When you're ready. If you're ready. But promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll never let him make you feel like you weren't enough. Like his leaving was somehow your fault. Because it wasn't. None of it was. He left because of who he was, not because of who you were." "I promise," David said. Then softer. "Did you ever think we'd get here? That I'd actually graduate? Go to college? Honestly? Well, there were so many times I thought we wouldn't make it. Times I thought I'd fail you. But you never let me quit. Even when you didn't know I was thinking about it. You just kept being you, smart and kind and determined. You gave me a reason to keep going. You gave me everything, Mama. Everything I needed to become this person. And I know it wasn't easy. I know you sacrificed things I'll probably never fully understand. But I see you. I've always seen you." We sat in comfortable silence after that. Two people who'd survived the impossible. Who'd built something beautiful out of ashes and determination. Later, alone in my room, I pulled out the box I kept hidden in the back of my closet. The one with all the important papers. The memories I couldn't bear to throw away. Birth certificate. Report cards. Photos from happier times. And at the bottom, that picture David had drawn when he was 13. The one that said, "My hero." I looked at it now with different eyes. For years I'd seen my failures in that picture. All the ways I hadn't been enough. But maybe David was right. Maybe I'd been enough all along. I thought about the lessons these 18 years had taught me. About resilience. About the difference between giving up and letting go. About how strength isn't always loud and aggressive. Sometimes it's quiet and stubborn. Showing up day after day even when everything in you wants to quit. I thought about forgiveness too. Not the kind where you forget what happened or excuse the hurt, but the kind where you release the weight of it. Where you stop letting someone else's choices define your worth. Did I forgive Marcus? I didn't know. Maybe I never would. But I was learning to forgive myself. For the mistakes I'd made. For the moments I'd missed. For being human and flawed and doing my best in an impossible situation. That was enough. Had to be enough. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. We shopped for dorm supplies at thrift stores and discount outlets. Packed everything David would need into 2 battered suitcases and a cardboard box. Said goodbye to Mrs. Chen, who cried and gave David a red envelope with money she couldn't afford to give but insisted anyway. The day we drove to me, 4 hours in my ancient car that I'd prayed the whole way would make it, I felt every emotion at once. Pride, fear, joy. This was what I'd worked for. What I'd dreamed of. But it also meant letting go. Letting my son step into a world I'd never be part of. Trusting that I'd given him enough to succeed without me. We pulled up to the campus, and David's eyes went wide. The buildings, the other students, the sheer scale of it all. This was real. This was happening. You belong here, I told him as we unloaded his things. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't. You earned this. So did you, he said. You earned this too. We set up his dorm room. Met his roommate, a kid from California whose parents had brought a whole moving truck of stuff. They were nice, friendly. Didn't seem to notice or care that David's belongings fit in 2 suitcases. And then it was time for me to go. We stood outside his dorm, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. I'm going to call you every day, David said. Don't, I laughed through tears. Live your life. Make friends. Study. Call me once a week. That's enough. Once a week, he agreed. Then he hugged me and I held my son, my baby, my whole heart, and let myself cry. Happy tears this time. Proud tears. I love you, I whispered. I love you too, Mama. Thank you. For everything. I drove home alone, my car feeling too empty, my chest aching with the bittersweet pain of letting go. But underneath the sadness was something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. We'd made it. Against every odd, every obstacle, every moment of doubt, we'd made it. And as I drove through the fading afternoon light, I realized something profound. Marcus hadn't won by leaving. And I hadn't lost by staying. We'd both made choices, and those choices had consequences. His consequence was missing out on an extraordinary human being. Mine was getting to raise him. I'd take my consequence over his any day. The apartment felt strange without David. Too quiet. Too empty. But I didn't let myself fall apart. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in 18 years. Arrested. Took a week off work. Actual vacation time I'd earned but never used. Slept late. Read books. Sat in parks and watched people. Let myself just be, without the constant pressure of survival. And slowly, carefully, I started thinking about what came next. Not for David. He had his path now. But for me. Who was I without the identity of struggling single mother? Who did I want to be? The answers didn't come immediately. But for the first time in my adult life, I had the space to ask the questions. That felt like victory enough. 1 year later, I stood in the same auditorium. Different ceremony, same seats. But everything else had changed. This time I wasn't watching my son graduate. I was graduating. At 40 years old, I'd finally enrolled in those nursing classes I'd dreamed about when I was 21. Community college. Night classes. 2 years of juggling work and school the way I'd once juggled 3 jobs. But I'd done it. David sat in the audience, home for Thanksgiving break, wearing a proud smile that mirrored the one I'd worn at his graduation. Next to him was Claire, crying happy tears like she always did. And a few rows back, because I told him he could come, but only if he sat in the back, was Marcus. He'd called 3 months after David's graduation. Asked if he could meet for coffee. Just to talk. David had agreed, cautiously, and I'd driven him to that first meeting and waited in the parking lot like a bodyguard, ready to intervene if Marcus hurt him again. But Marcus had shown up, and he'd kept showing up. Weekly phone calls, monthly visits, slow, careful attempts to build something where nothing had existed before. He'd gotten a job in construction again, not glamorous but honest work, and was digging himself out of his financial hole one paycheck at a time. His wife had left him when the money disappeared. His other kids didn't talk to him much. He'd lost almost everything just like I had 18 years ago, and he was learning finally what it meant to rebuild from nothing. I didn't feel vindicated by his suffering. Felt nothing. He was just a man now. Not a monster, not a hero. Just a flawed human being who'd made terrible choices and was trying too late to make amends. David had decided to give him a chance. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but a chance. They had lunch once a month. Talked about surface things mostly, school, work, the weather. David kept him at arm's length, protected his heart, set boundaries. I was proud of him for that. For knowing his worth. For not letting desperation for a father override his need for respect. As for me and Marcus, we were cordial, polite. We'd never be friends. Would never have the closure people talk about in movies. But we'd reached a kind of peace. The kind where you acknowledge that something terrible happened, that people were hurt, but that holding on to anger forever only hurts yourself. My name was called. Sarah Mitchell. I'd taken back my maiden name years ago, erased Rivera from every document I could. I walked across that stage, accepted my certificate, heard David whistle and cheer from the audience, and felt something I hadn't felt in 2 decades. Pride in myself. Not just for surviving, but for choosing finally to live. After the ceremony, David ran up and hugged me, lifting me off my feet even though I told him I was too old for that. "I'm so proud of you, Mama," he said. "Look at us. Both college graduates. You're the MIT engineer," I laughed. "I'm just a community college nurse." Just. He pulled back, serious now. "Don't do that. Don't diminish what you've accomplished. You worked 3 jobs, raised a kid, survived hell, and still found the strength to go back to school at 40. That's not just anything. That's extraordinary." Extraordinary? Me? The woman who'd spent years thinking she was barely adequate. Claire joined us, pulling us both into a group hug. "My favorite people," she said. "My favorite success story." Marcus approached slowly, hesitantly. "Congratulations, Sarah," he said. This is really great." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. Not because I needed his approval, but because I'd learned that accepting kindness, even from imperfect sources, was part of healing. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly, while David was distracted talking to Claire. "Sure. How did you do it? How did you keep going when everything was falling apart?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw genuine curiosity. Maybe even regret. "I didn't have a choice," I said simply. "Or I thought I didn't. But the truth is, we always have choices. You chose to leave. Chose to stay. And those choices defined us. Shaped who we became. You made your choice and learned to live with it. I made mine and learned to thrive despite it. I don't know if I would have been strong enough," he admitted, "to do what you did. To survive all that." "You would have," I said. "Because when you don't have options, you find strength you didn't know existed. That's not special. That's just human. We're all capable of more than we think." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. I'm sorry for all of it." "I know you are," I said. "And I've forgiven you. Not for your sake. For mine. Because carrying that anger around was killing me. So I let it go. Not because you earned forgiveness, but because I earned peace." Those words felt true in a way nothing else had. I had forgiven him. Not the kind of forgiveness that erases consequences or pretends the past didn't happen, but the kind that releases you from the prison of bitterness. That lets you move forward without the weight of someone else's choices holding you back. We said goodbye. Marcus heading back to his small apartment, his humble life, his slow climb toward redemption. David, Claire, and I went to dinner like we had a year ago, but this time the conversation was lighter, easier. We talked about David's classes, about his new girlfriend, about my upcoming job at the hospital. We talked about the future instead of surviving the present. That night, alone in my apartment, still small, still shabby, but mine, I pulled out that drawing one more time. My hero. And I finally understood what David had seen all along. Not perfection. Not someone who never made mistakes or never wanted to quit. But someone who stayed. Someone who fought. Someone who loved him enough to sacrifice everything. That was heroism. Not the loud, dramatic kind. But the quiet, daily kind. The kind that shows up when it's hard. That keeps going when it would be easier to stop. I'd been a hero all along. I just hadn't known how to see it. The lessons of those 18 years would stay with me forever. They'd shaped me, scarred me, strengthened me in ways I was still discovering. But they didn't define me anymore. I was more than my struggles. More than my pain. More than the woman Marcus had left behind. I was Sarah Mitchell. Nurse. Mother. Survivor. And finally enough. So let me ask you something. Have you forgiven what hurt you? Not for them, but for yourself. Have you released the weight of someone else's choices? Have you stopped letting your past define your worth? Because here's what I learned. Holding on to pain doesn't protect you, just makes you smaller, angrier, more bitter. And you deserve better than that. You deserve peace. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Doesn't mean excusing. It doesn't mean letting people back in who don't deserve to be there. It means choosing yourself, choosing freedom, choosing to build a life that isn't defined by what was done to you but by who you choose to become. You are not your worst moment. You are not what happened to you. You are what you do next. How you rise, how you rebuild, how you choose every single day to keep going. And if you're in the middle of your storm right now, if you're drowning, if you're exhausted, if you can't see a way forward, please know this. You are stronger than you think. You are capable of more than you know. And somewhere on the other side of this pain, there's a version of you who made it through, who survived, who thrived. That version is waiting for you. You just have to keep walking toward them. One step at a time. One day at a time. One impossible moment at a time. You've got this. And even on the days you don't believe that, even on the days you want to quit, keep going anyway. Because your story isn't over. This isn't the end. It's just the part where everything changes. So tell me, what's your next chapter going to be? What will you choose when the world gives you every reason to give up? Who will you become when everything falls apart? Chose to rise, fight, to prove that circumstances don't define destiny. Now it's your turn.